Whoa, it's Wulzy. I started a mega collab a year ago. I made one video doing a tiny bit of decoration and gameplay, and now this video is making the final part. Shout out to the group Flingus4. We've had a couple of streams here and there. It wasn't as smooth as we expected, so we're just trying to get the level out. I wanted to grind it out, so I spent my afternoon trying to make the most climactic section of the level so far, and I think it went really well. But in turn, there's no live commentary for this video, so I'm trying out post-commentary. Let me know what you think and subscribe if you enjoy. This is just the gameplay stage. I tried to make a lot of open flying sections with big swoops of gameplay, with slopes like this that correct the path by the end of the open section. It turned out being just as intense as I'd hoped in the actual, structured sections, without too much tweaking, which was pretty cool. The first thing that I made was a color loop that cycles through the rainbow with a few jumps. It's on a short fade time. You can see here, I'm just occasionally skipping back in the color wheel to a more interesting color, so it's not just a smooth rainbow that would get pretty boring. I copied this color channel 38 a lot when I was creating pulses, like the ones in the background that I do later on. It was just really handy. I put all of the objects on this color, even the portals, just by copying the values and pasting them on. But, as I learned from WAF, if you pulse the portals the color instead, it colors both sides, and it looks a lot nicer, so thank you WAF. With this color channel, I placed some glow on the orbs and made a smaller copy of the glow with a different hue on the opposite side by going into the HSV tab and using the slider at the top. Then, on low opacity, I added some scaled up pulsing circles just to give them a bit of oomph to them that, just looks cool. The background of this entire part is pretty much the juice of the whole video. There's many different aspects to it. I set out an alpha trigger loop that fades a group on and off on 0.1 fade time, I believe. I set the trigger on the left to become the group parent, so when I scaled up and created more sets, the objects scaled around that point, which means that they all have the same starting point. You can see on the very left, they're all in line, and then they go out of sync eventually. There's 10 loops here, and they're slightly slower than one another as it goes further down, because the gaps between each trigger gets bigger and bigger as you scale the whole set of triggers up. And I had to snip some off the end, but that's okay. I used these for 10 lines, that created a really nice looking pulsing beam once I copy pasted them and flipped them on the other side so they would match up and create a sort of mirrored effect. I considered putting it on the player's path, but the movement was ugly with the follow player Y, so I created my own movements using some nice easings. It's just the go-to. Up and down the screen, so it's somewhat central to the level. I planned on using a lot of dark blocks, so this background was intended to kind of light up the path in front, and I think it does that pretty well in the result. You'll see. To exit the part, I used the bounce in easing, with each layer of the beam one by one. Some up, some down, just to messily disperse them off the screen and look like the part's going out of control by the end. It worked pretty much as I envisioned. I think it's really beautiful, to be honest. I kind of nailed this first try. I will say, I did go back and add a bunch of hues to the different strips just so they go different colors and it looks a lot more rainbow as a result. But then I thought, you know what, this is a bit bright and flashy. I'm gonna cover up the beam a little bit with some slopes that kind of mask it and make it a bit more unique and kind of change the way it looks. But no matter what I tried, it just looked ugly. It was obscuring it, but not in a satisfying way, right? So I just gave up on that, but in the process of the whole thing, I did have a good idea, which was to scale the entire beam up on another copy on low opacity, and then layer it above the black stripes, which actually gave the level a really colorful texture, and even though it was masked and very dark most of the time, you could still see like the remnants of those pulsing beams. I just thought it was cool. So then I thought, I was able to get something good from that. Why don't I just keep trying with a different type of overlay to go above the beam with the black blocks? Maybe it'll work better, right? I was still set on having that black effect, and I'd watched Black Blizzard by Carmel the day before, which has the rotating beams, and I thought that's cool. I could probably do something similar using a black overlay. And that's exactly what I did. It gave me the idea to rotate a square with glowy edges around the corners. Around this center point here, I made 15 copies of this square, which was pretty object intensive. I'm not going to show the exact amount. Each one rotates an extra 360 degrees more than the last. And my first take looked absolutely terrible. I tried many different opacities, but none of them looked as cool as I'd imagined. It just darkened the whole level and covered up too much of the screen. It just covered the whole screen, to be honest. So what I did is I geniusly removed a lot of the squares at a time by making a toggle loop. My first attempt was pretty bad. It was extremely simple. It just showed one square and then toggled it at the same time as showing the next one, and then toggled that one at the same time as showing the next one after that, and it just looked okay. So I decided to get funky. I copy pasted the loop, I flipped it, so maybe there will be two squares at the same time, right? But, this is important. I half spaced it in between the stages of the first loop. So sometimes it showed one, sometimes it showed two. And I believe this is what creates the glitchy looking effect that is in the final result right here. I know it's really fast, but if you just slow it down and look at each individual frame, sometimes the squares are on opposite ends, sometimes there's only a single square visible, and sometimes they overlap, which is a really cool and diverse effect. And honestly, it's quite funny because that probably took the least amount of effort in this entire process, even the gameplay. So, I went with the obscuring idea. After all, I mean, it's a lot darker than I initially is the word I'm looking for, than I initially thought it was going to be. You know, I kind of deviated from my plans, but when I changed the objects to black, I decided that I actually liked the default objects, so I structured them a little bit. I also made a few saw blades with pulsing triangles on the layers above them, using that sweet color channel number 38 that I so beautifully set up earlier. I love that thing so much. I think the overall shape of the gameplay is really satisfying to pass. It's very curvy. And from that point, I kind of just rocked with it. I came to a standstill. I didn't know what else to do. I thought about trying to intensify it a little bit by adding a black glow overlay that shrinks the screens in the straight flying sections or the straight waving sections, just the open ones that I left out earlier. I wanted it to be like a little searchlight or something, but it was kind of just average, so I decided to change the color of it and make it more unique. I changed it to white, so it stood out amongst all of the other colors. There's a lot of blending stuff here. The white just pops out, and that is pretty much the extent that I went to for this part. It took me 2 hours to figure out. The whole mega collab is being built on the rules that each member can alter each other's parts. So I just sent in what I had, and I believe it's getting a blog designed by someone else now. But yeah, personally, I'd call this done. So at least I can say that I did it to my heart's content. I really enjoyed making it. I was faced with a few challenges in the editor, which I really love sometimes, and I think they paid off. Thank you for watching. Check the links in the description, leave a like and subscribe, and have a good day.